Nadir, and today I'll be doing a Zorga deck profile. So starting off with the right lane, we have the 0, the 1, the 2, and 3. Into the grade 3s, we do run 2 Zorga Nadir. I wouldn't put the third one in, but the space is tight of what I'm running on the deck. But with Zorga in general, the main reason why you're running Zorga is for the soul, because the deck does tend to limit the soul with your shadow cloaks and a couple other cards running the deck. That's why we still run at least 2 Zorga Nadirs in the deck. Next for our grade 3s, we run 4 copies of Roaming Prison Dragon. He's just an easy discard that calls himself back as well when we play in order. But if you Alchemy Magic, he gets both his effects. So it's just really strong card in the early game, and in the later stage of the game, him always getting tank out a crit can help us with damage denial, keep the opponent at 4 or more, and just threatening lethal every turn. So that's why Roaming Prison Dragon is a really strong card in this deck. Next we do have 4 Shadow Cloaks. This is really good for fully sparing our orders and drops, so we're always having cards to bind through and then Alpha Magic with Zorga, and then being able to bounce regards back to hand is really good, especially with PGs or sometimes himself. It just depends on the situation. Sometimes we might bounce other cards, but the main cards of bouncing every turn is usually PGs, sometimes the center line if you need extra soul or an extra push, or sometimes himself, so you can reuse your shadow cloaks. Okay, so next we do have 3 different one-offs in the deck. So first of all, we'll talk about Brave Shooter. So Brave Shooter is good both offensive and defensively. Being able to either guard over it or ditch it to draw one is really good. Sometimes we just need to dig through our deck just a little bit more. But it's the second effect of being able to add an order back to hand, or being able to call a rearguard from job is really handy, because sometimes we need that extra call, or we might just need an order because we may be a bit dry. Shooter definitely helps with that. So that's Brave 1/1 Brave Shooter. For the Carrion Crush, Carrion Crush enables 5 attacks on a Divine turn, but it scales really well in the late game anyway, because for each order in the bind zone, it gets 5k power. So it slowly starts to scale, and our deck ends up becoming a really strong 4 attack deck. So let's throw 1/1 Carrion Crush. Next we do have 1 copy of Impending Karma. So Impending Karma is really good on a bind turn. But it's also really good sometimes in very rare scenarios with speeding up our cards in the bind zone, so that we can make bigger, scarier columns much faster. That's why we run 1 copy of Impending Karma. Next for our grade 1s, we run 4 copies of Harvest Elf. This card is absolutely insane. We're essentially always trying to call these off from Zorga's skill, calling out 2 elves, and then with our Alpha Magic and calling our dragons out, we're essentially using our elves, the problem solve, and the dragons to draw cards. Really good in the other game as well, as again, if we do place from the hand, we can generate a token and get free aggression. And obviously really good if we open a couple with a drag and then get a token. Really good early game potential, and it just helps us maintain a really good hand from turn 3 and onwards. So that's probably run 4 Harvest Off. For 2 one-offs and grade 1s, we're doing 1 Rogue Headhunter and 1 Pentalance. Pentalance is really good when we need a top of soul, because we do have an order to use a soul, but also if we need soul for our Shadow Cloaks, or may need a soul from the Blind skill, we do have it there. And the Rogue Headhunter helps us mitigate counterblast for turns where we may use a lot of counterblasts for our orders, and maybe using Carrion Crushes on top. It can definitely help with mitigating those costs. So that's probably one of these 2 grade 1s in the deck. Then of course we have 4 PGs. The reason why we don't run Sanctitude is we're more focusing on getting our PGs out, return them back to make the hand, something we can't do with Sanctitude. Next for orders, first of all, we'll speak with both these orders at once, with the Overrated Corpses and Card of Miasma. These 2 cards combined, especially calling out our elves and dragons, these combined essentially give our front row 15k power. So it makes some really strong numbers without having to rely on Persona Ride. With Clown Nails being able to call something out of this ball is a good little cherry on top, because sometimes call like a card that we can bounce back to hand, but mainly for that power. So that's why we run these two orders in the deck. Really good on Persona Ride turns as well, or Divine turns. Next we do run one copy of Regurgitation of the Underworld. So we're only doing with this is a way of us to retire on the deck. Sometimes we may retire a Regard so we can plus maybe like a grade 2, maybe call out the Cloak and our shooter, or the main purpose is popping a grade 1 to call 2 PGs out to then get our cloaks to bounce the PGs back to hand. So we're always essentially trying to maximize the value from our Underworld. We're either getting 2 PGs or trying to find a way to get some good defense. So that's why we run a copy of the Underworld. Next we run one Radiance Caliburn. So Caliburn is a really strong Destroyalty order, being able to play and draw 2 cards, especially when it's stabilizing or just trying to kind of get back into the game, build a bit of the hand. Radiance Caliburn is really good for that, like on our first turn, first free turn, sorry, so that's a really good card. Next we do have one copy of Gather Wandering Souls. Wandering Souls is really good is when we start to have too many orders at hand and we need to kind of like ditch a brick for shield potentially. That's really good. So it's very one Gathering Souls. Next we do have one Command of Dexterous Restraint. The Dexterous Restraint is also really good for calling Reguards out if you want to potentially bounce to hand or add orders back to hand. It just depends. So he's very versatile in that regard for either looking for orders to bounce back to hand or Reguards, so really good. Next we do have one Overcoming a Natural Death. A Natural Death is really good for adding orders back to hand, because we've also run Blitz orders, so we always playing orders every turn, so we can keep the game flowing. Next we do have 2 Mafia Habitats. A habitat is essentially here for finding pieces. Once we end up finding everything, this card kind of falls off, but we do need to run it because we want to be as consistent as possible. So that's why we run 2 copies of Habitat. And then lastly, we do run 2 Abolishment of Sins. It's a really strong Blitz order that scales defensively over time. It gets, essentially when you play, it gets a draw a card, and then it gets 5k power for each different order in the drop of bind zone. So in some points of the game, we can just play Abolishment of Sins and it quite literally just guards an attack. So that's why we run 2 Abolishment of Sins. Now next for our triggers, so we run 1 OT, 4 heals, 7 fronts, and 4 crits. So the crits, heals, and OT are kind of self-explanatory, but what's a little bit different is that we're running more fronts than we are crits. So the reason why is we're running more fronts than crits on the deck is this deck isn't really aiming to kind of sack the opponent out and blow them out of the water, as we have a lot of crit pressure already from our dragons. And the Divine turns, our dragons are hitting crazy numbers anyway. So we're focusing more on utility, being able to survive turns and always have resources so we can continuously use cards like Shadow Cloak and our orders every turn. So the 20k front's very handy in that regard. Sometimes just 20k and a 15k combined just is enough to guard, compared to sometimes maybe 215s. So it's just a really strong 20k shield. And then with the T-Knight Rothion, as I said, it is another way of us getting soul without having to use the grade 1. So then we can use cards like our Shadow Cloaks more consistently to bounce contact the hand, our Divine turns, and also for our Regurgitation. Alright guys, that is a deck profile. If you did have any questions, definitely feel free to leave it in the comments down below, and I will do my best to answer your questions. But anyway, that's it for me. Make sure to leave a like, and while you're down there, why not subscribe, and then hit the notification bell so that when I upload another video, you will be notified. Adios out. See ya.